So my last video created quite a bit of discussion as we talked about the Daytona 500 potentially not having a full 40-car entry list for the 2022 running of the Great American Race. And there were some great discussions in the comment section talking about possibilities that open cars could materialize from. So in this video, I want to go over a little bit more in depth some of the open teams and open cars that could potentially enter the Daytona 500, including one combination that I believe is a realistic possibility to get us to 40 cars on the entry list for the 2022 Daytona 500. We're also going to be talking a few real quick blurbs from around the world of racing that really don't justify their own video, but I think you should still know about. So without too much further ado, let's get into it. But first, a message from our sponsor. As fall transitions to winter, there's nothing better than cozying up with a comforting, home-cooked meal. The holidays can be a hectic time, but HelloFresh keeps things simple with recipes and ingredients that cut out grocery shopping and limit meal prep time so you can spend more of the festive season with friends and family. You guys already know why HelloFresh is America's #1 food delivery kit. You get delicious meals that are fun to make, correctly proportioned as to not waste food, and sustainable. Nearly all of the packaging used to ship your food is made from recycled material. Go to HelloFresh.com and use the code LAND16 to get 16 free meals plus 3 free gifts. You heard that right. 16 free meals plus 3 free gifts at HelloFresh.com when you use the code LAND16. Okay, so some quick racing news and notes from around the world. Juan Pablo Montoya, as I was able to confirm recently, is going to be expected for the third Arrow McLaren SP car at the Indianapolis 500. This had been a bit of a mystery, though certainly the result isn't very mysterious, as of course Montoya not only drove for the team last year in the 500, but got a top 10 finish. There was some question about who would get that ride. Of course, Kyle Kirkwood was offered it at one point, ultimately went to AJ Foyt Racing, but it does sound like as well, talking to some people close to the situation, that the third car for Arrow McLaren SP will more or less run the rest of the post-Indy 500 season, and that the driver would be Stoffel Vandoorne for the lion's share of those races. Now, there's some concern about whether or not he would prioritize Formula E. Again, I can only tell you what I've been told, and it sounds like Stoffel's going to be the priority at Arrow McLaren because, of course, that's kind of who they've got circled right now to run that car full-time in 2023. Jimmy Johnson will compete in the 2022 IMSA Michelin Endurance Cup for the second year in a row with the Action Express Racing Ally Cadillac DPI. He will be joined by Mike Rockefeller, Kamui Kobayashi, and Jose Maria Lopez, who is new to the team, over from the Toyota side of things in the World Endurance Championship to share the driving duties. And finally, Mercedes will return to its traditional silver livery for the 2022 Formula One season following a 2-year fling with a striking black livery. Though there's still no confirmation that Lewis Hamilton will return to the team, we're expecting that at this time to pair with newcomer, well, not so newcomer, but newcomer in terms of a full-time ride, George Russell. Now, let's talk about the 2022 Daytona 500 and the potential or the potentiality of a short field. Now, certainly I already did a full video on this. We're expecting right now 38 cars. There are 38 confirmed entries, and if you want to see all of those broken down, especially the charter teams, go check out my previous video. So there's 36 charter teams, and then you've got 4 open slots on the grid. Now, the 2 confirmed cars, again, we went over in the previous video, are the 62 Beard Oil car of Noah Gragson and the 66 MBM car of driver to be announced. There has not been a driver announced for that car yet, but of course they are entering the Daytona 500. Now, the big discussion was who is going to fill the field if NASCAR is going to get to 40 cars for the Daytona 500. And ultimately, the way I look at it, and the way I looked at it when I made my previous video, is it comes down to who has the equipment. So here are the realistic and perhaps one or two that are not so realistic in terms of who can make it. 36 car from Front Row Motorsports. Now, what's important to know about the chartered teams, particularly the ones that aren't at the 4-car limit, they can certainly enter open cars. There's nothing stopping a 2-car chartered team from entering an extra car. Each chartered team will have eventually 7 next-gen chassis at their disposal. So with only 2 cars entered, if they have all 7 cars, they have plenty of equipment that they could do an extra car. They also have a history of entering David Reagan in that car. They've done it the last couple of years as an open car. The question is going to be for the defending winners of the Daytona 500, is the risk worth it with part supply issues at least certainly going to be a factor in February at Daytona, particularly if you start thinking about if the potential or the potentiality of a crash happening and riding off a chassis. Do you want to have an open car in there that potentially could hamper the defending winner of the race, Michael McDowell's chances of winning the race? I think that's the big holdup for a team like Front Row Motorsports, and certainly one that will exist this year and not so much next year. I think next year would be much more likely where you'd see third cars coming from charter teams. The money team. A lot of people speculate or skeptical about this one, and I am too. There are a few whispers, again, from fairly legitimate people that there's something happening here. I'm not confident. There's no equipment at that team that we know of publicly at this point. It's very late for a team to get equipment, especially an open team. That's the head scratcher for me. I'm just not confident at all that this is going to happen, at least for the Daytona 500, if at all. I mean, let's be honest. I think we've been talking about this team for 2 years, but they keep coming up in conversation. The third Rick Ware car. Now, kind of the same thing as Front Row Motorsports. The team has equipment, but do you risk the 2 chartered cars that are going to be in the race anyway? Potential spare parts to race an unchartered one, is the risk enough to justify the reward? Because if you crash some cars in the duels or crash them in practice, or even you talk about crashing them in the race, do you want to hurt the cars that you've already paid for to be in the race? And even if you crash the unchartered car, is the entry fee or the prize money worth the risk? That's the big question. Now we get to the 2 entries that I think could fill the field. The 96 Gaunt Brothers Racing Team. Now, they have a chassis. That chassis was at PRI, the Motorsports Convention in Indianapolis. I would say they're the most likely out of all the unconfirmed open teams that has yet to enter that possibly would. They have a track record of not only making it to races, but they also, generally speaking, run the restrictor plate races, the super speedway races, I guess we're calling them now. They're not so much restrictor plate races anymore. But again, the holdup is, because they're in a non-chartered team, they're going to have trouble. They're going to be last on the priority list of getting parts, and they have not even tested yet. So that's the big holdup there. They'd be showing up to Daytona very, very unprepared. And so that's maybe the risk versus reward thing for the Gaunt brothers, is that do they want to go to Daytona unprepared, or do they want to have a good stockpile of parts before they start entering races? We move on to what very well could be the 39th or 40th entry, depending on what Gaunt brothers do. And that's Heisberg Motorsports. They come from the Euro NASCAR side of things. They're actually being run in the States by Riom Brothers Racing. Now, I did not include this team already in the previous video because they had announced that they were only going to do a limited schedule in 2022 of road courses and short tracks. Now, I had some information get to me from someone within the sport who, again, I would trust pretty solidly that there is a possibility that this team could be convinced to go to the Daytona 500. And there may be some things behind the scenes that are working. Now, they have the equipment and they've actually tested, which really in a lot of ways puts them over the Gaunt brothers in terms of how close they would be to entering the Daytona 500. Now, the driver that they have announced as running some races is Loris Hasemans, who is obviously a Euro NASCAR driver, but he would not be very likely to be approved to run Cup at Daytona, as his first Cup Series start. So what do you do? Well, Jacques Villeneuve, who is the 1997 Formula One World Champion, 1995 Kart Series Champion, and 1995 Indianapolis 500 Champion, has already tested the car, though it was on the road course at Charlotte Motor Speedway. I think a very compelling case could be made that Jacques Villeneuve certainly has the credentials and the super speedway experience to run 200 miles an hour for a new team in the pack and be very, very safe. So, and this is something that I actually specifically heard, is that this is a possibility. Jacques Villeneuve for Haysburg Motorsports, that's hard to say, in the Daytona 500 is kind of an extra entry to try to get the car count close, if not over that 40 mark. We'll have to see. So to conclude, the path I see to a full 40-car field is this. The Gaunt brothers put something together, and they make it down to Daytona, as well as Haysburg for Jacques Villeneuve. Does that sound unlikely to you, or does it sound plausible? Let me know down in the comments below. Will Daytona have a full field for the Daytona 500? Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Lane on YouTube. Subscribe for more motorsport content. Get you some HelloFresh, and we'll see you in the next video.